Imagine if you could identify the password spray attacks in real time and mitigate them. Also, if you could identify who are the users that have been compromised in your Azure Active Directory and you could prevent their sign ins. Hello, and welcome to our video series. I am Piyush Goyal from Detox Technologies, and today we'll be talking about Azure AD identity protection and how this can help us in identifying the risky users and the risky sign ins. Okay, so the threat to us is that there are risky users and there are risky sign ins. To understand the difference between the both, the risky users are the users whose accounts is sure to be compromised or in a data breach, their passwords have been compromised. While by risky sign-ins, we mean that there are several properties of a sign-in that from where a user is signing in, from which device the user is signing in, the IP address, and there are several other things. So if we could identify a pattern, and then we can conclude that this user does not deserve to be signed in, or a user should identify using an MFA before signing in. This can help us reduce the threat of our Azure Active Directory. The simple and effective solution for this is using the Azure AD Identity Protection. Here are three types of risks that are present, and we can mitigate those risks. There are three levels of risk. These are low, medium, and high. There are user risk, like there are leaked credentials, there or the threat intelligence of Microsoft Azure. Then there are sign-in risks. This can be anonymous IP, atypical travel. For example, a user who lives in US suddenly travels to Afghanistan or a hostile country like North Korea. There can be malware linked IP addresses, the IP addresses that have malware linked. This is identified using several of the web crawlers. There can be unfamiliar sign-in properties. There can be malicious IP addresses, impossible travel, like there can be if a user is signing in currently from US and then suddenly changes his location to India, this is an impossible travel. And the password spray attack, of course. The actions that we can take are block access or require MFA, or we can alert the admins also on a daily or in real time basis. So let's jump to the practical to see how the Azure AD identity protection works. In Azure AD Identity Protection, we need a global administrator and an Azure P2 Premium license as a minimum requirement. In free trial, we can use the P2, we can get a P2 license. So when we go to the Azure Active Directory and we move to security, we see a column here of identity protection. In identity protection, here's our dashboard after we have assigned the P2 premium role. This is the dashboard we see where we can observe the risky users and risky sign-ins. Again, this has been set up only a few days ago, and as per the documentation of Azure, it generally takes 10 to 14 days for the machine learning behavior of Azure to identify what can be the risky sign-ins and what can be the risky users. So to enable the risky users, we just need an assignment where we select all the users. It is recommended to exclude one user, that is the admin user, for break glass practice. We identify the risk that can be high, medium, or above, or low. It is recommended to select the high as the control here, because in this because if we select the low and above, we'll be prompted with too much of alerts. If we select high, then Azure will alert us if there is any of the high risk. We can then set the access to require password change or to completely block the access of that user. So if there's any user which has an identified high risk, then we can block the access of that user. To enable this policy, we can enforce this policy to be on or off. If we enforce the policy, if we set the option of enforce policy to off, then there will be no action taken by the Azure, and only an alert will be generated to the admin. If we enforce the policy, if we set this to on, then that user will require a password change before signing in. So if there's a user who has his credentials compromised, then that will require a password change, or we can also block the access. Coming to the sign-in policy, there's the exact same field, but we recommend setting it to medium or high. Uh, the rest, all the things are same except the assignments. We can require the multi-factor authentication. If we find there's a sign-in risk associated with an account, we can require the multi-factor authentication of that account. After we have set it up, we can save the changes, and this is done. We have set up the identity protection for our account, and now if there are any risks, we'll be prompted, the admin will be prompted. So currently there are no risks associated because, as I said, it takes some time for Azure AD to learn the pattern on which typically the users log in. So this is the documentation which provides various types of risks which are associated, and how the Azure identity protection identifies those risks. We can generate a report of risky users and risky sign-ins from any time, like last 24 hours, custom time interval. So it can generate a report. The additional benefit of this is weekly digest. We can get a weekly digest of all the users of all the risks associated on our global administrator role. That is my account. So we can send a weekly digest email, and this will help us to know which are the users, which are the sign-ins that have happened, and this is a detailed report. Besides, we also have a dashboard which will show us all the graphs, and we can then get to know the risks associated with the accounts in our Azure AD. Thank you for our video. We'll be discussing about a new topic in the new video. Till then, subscribe us and stay tuned.